Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the Kid Lit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of Kid Lit Love. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Kid Lit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm here today with Leslie Connor, author of several middle grade YA books and even a picture book. You might recognize some of her titles like Waiting for Normal, The Things You Kiss Goodbye, A Home for Goddesses and Dogs, which I think is my current favorite, and anybody here seen Frenchie? Leslie, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And likewise, I'm excited to talk to you too, Stephanie. This will be great. It'll be fun.
I've been looking forward to this. As I mentioned to you before we hit record, you were on my wish list of first round guests to get onto the podcast. So I am so excited you're here. And what listeners don't know is that we actually got to meet in person a couple of months ago, I would say, at a children's literature festival where I may have, rushed your table in fangirl style because I didn't realize you were there, and then caught a glimpse of the cover of Anybody Here Seen Frenchie and rushed right over to chat with you. So I'm so looking forward to the conversation today for sure.
As am I. Yeah.
Well, why don't we begin with kind of your typical introductions? Can you give listeners a little bit about you and your backstory as a writer? And then after, we'll get to talk about some of your books.
Sure. I'll do the best I can. Let's see if I can remember the beginnings of my career. Um, I think that one of the funniest things is that I never intended to be a children's book writer. I actually kind of came to the field thinking of myself more as an illustrator and artist. That's what I studied in school. I was enjoying writing picture book manuscripts and then working toward getting, illustrating. But I found it a really big struggle to do a 32-page book, to tell you the truth, with the art. And, I don't know if I was that good. I guess I wasn't, keeping that character the same and everything. But also, I kept ignoring the fact that I had this kind of, at least one middle grade novel idea in my head that I just wasn't writing. I just wasn't acknowledging it. And one night I did and read it out loud to, a critique group. And lo and behold, almost everybody said, that's your voice. The other tip off to that might have been that I was submitting and sometimes I was getting good feedback, no offers, but good feedback. And one of the things that they were saying to me was, some of your fiction work feels like it wants to be a longer work. Have you ever decided, thought about writing middle grade? And I said no, because I hadn't. But lo and behold, this is kind of my wheelhouse, and I'm very happy, to be here with it. So. Yeah, I live in the Connecticut woods, southern Connecticut. I was telling you, Stephanie, earlier that I have this little writing shed because I have a tiny house with an open floor plan, and my husband is retired. And so we decided it was time for this, and this has been the right thing to do. So we have to heat it with wood and, run down to the house for plumbing. But it's worked out really well. It feels like a really happy space to write in these days. And so all is well. Yeah. And I think I am working on my 10th book right now. So most of them are middle grade. As I say, that seems to be my place in the industry. Not that I'm going to totally pigeonhole myself, but that is where I've been writing.
Yeah. And that's where I found you. So the very first book that I read of yours was Waiting for Normal. And I was specifically looking for a book, actually, to recommend to the teachers that I worked with in a particular district. And this book happened to be set in that district in upstate New York and take place just minutes from where I live, both in the Schenectady area and the Lake George area. So if you are a New Yorker, you might know where that took place. And I was so excited because I knew if I could give these kids a book, and these are kids who were a little bit reluctant to read, who were going through things where reading might not have been their first priority. I knew if I could give them a book with some hyper local references to hook them in, and to meet a character that may be going through things that are similar to what they are going through, I knew I would have sealed the deal. And that's exactly what I did with your book. I loved it. It touched my adult heart. And I know it did the same for the teachers and the students that I ended up pressing into their hands over and over and over again. So,
Well, thank you for that.
yes.
And yeah, I'm glad that it resonates. I really kind of, I grew up outside of Schenectady, and that was kind of, where you went to buy your school shoes and and I really kind of thought of that book as a little bit of a love letter back to the city of, the city I knew as a child. I think we have to clarify that upstate New Yorkers might know it. Like, I don't know if when we say New York, so many people think of the city only,
That's right.
But yeah, I just was inspired by place. And it's fun for me to know that you were pressing it into the hands of teachers and readers there. I actually have had some interaction with some schools in Schenectady, and one teacher really went the extra mile, and she created a walking tour of the map of the book for her students, and they had this big field day. And even though a lot of the places had changed and are partially fictionalized, as you know, if you read the book and know Schenectady, I did do that. I didn't want anybody knocking on people's doors or whatever, but that kind of thing. But they did go to some of the places and talk about it, and it was sort of funny because they were sort of at one point informing the CEO of some of a grocery store chain that this was the empty acre,
Right.
something had been built on it, and there was a very corporate building there next. But it was a very humble little spot where I just felt like, yeah, but a lot of charm seems to be here to me. And what about that kid who's kind of having that struggly life, but she was amazingly resilient, I thought. And she kind of arrived, and I kind of said, I'm going to honor this girl's story, and so that's where Addie Schmieder came from. And yeah, I just wanted to write somebody who would chin up, and
Yeah.
she did.
She
So
did. She definitely did.
yeah.
Can you give listeners who may not have read that book, because that isn't one of your newer ones lately, that one is a little bit more into the backlist, right?
It definitely is. It's the first middle grade I did. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you give listeners a little overview? Because I know they're going to be hooked into her story and want to dig back into your archives.
Oh, sure. Let me try. So Addie Schmieder is about 12 years old, in sixth grade. And in the opening scene of the book, she and her mother are being dropped off by her stepfather at a small trailer in the city on kind of a plain little lot, very near the train tracks. And also near a mini mart and a kind of a big empty lot. And these places, kind of really become her neighborhood. And it's a tough story in that, it's really the story, the depth of it is that it's a child abandonment case, honestly. But I think that it's so solidly in Addie's point of view that she doesn't name it that herself. Her mother is probably bipolar. It's always interesting when people write to me, including young readers, and say, I'm bipolar too, because we never say that the mother's bipolar, because
Right.
Addie only knows what she knows, which was, one of the things. Sometimes people have said to me, I didn't get that book. Where was the mother? But it's adults who say that to me, not kids. So that's kind of an interesting piece. Her life was what it was, and she was kind of there to make the most of it. And not that she didn't have some pretty strong longing, because her stepfather Dwight had custody of her two little half sisters, and that's who where her best shot at family was. And I think it's a big question: would she get it? And I'd seen enough books where stepfathers got the bad bad rap. And I
Yeah.
thought, what if there is that odd situation where your own parents are in some way unavailable to you, but they were a step parent or a former step parent. I mean, she could have been a grandparent too. Um, would be your best custodian.
Yeah.
Um, so she kind of, you know, dreamed of it in a sort of, I think, understated way. Um, but I do think it's what she hoped for. She was kind of a very earnest character, and yeah, I mean, so she's living at this trailer, does the wise decision to make friends in her new neighborhood, and so she befriends the people at the mini mart, and they kind of become a bit of a support for her, unofficial, in every way. But yeah, she spends a lot of nights alone though, and doesn't really know where her mom is, and her mom's behavior is what is it she says? I'm trying to remember. It's kind of like all or not. Oh, it's all or nothing is what her mother feels. It feels like she's either all in or she's really low, and there's one point where she's bringing home these turkey carcasses from a food kitchen, and making more soup than the family could eat. This family of two could eat in weeks. And yet the rest of the time, Addie is kind of scrounging together. There's definitely a food insecurity issue there, and she's making toast suppers. And I've gone to school visits and eaten many a toast supper concoction. Those kids like to make me bite into some really weird stuff. But I do it because, hey, it's all good fun, Something with mustard one day that was a challenge.
Oh.
It was what the mustard was put with. I think it might have been mustard and Nutella.
Oh, that is an interesting combination.
It was fun. It was fun. But the other neat thing that I've experienced with that book is that some kids will walk up to me and say, oh my gosh, that mother was horrible. But at the same time, if people ask me, what character would you befriend? And I said, well, the character I should befriend is the mom, because she's the person who needs a friend in that story. And so there's, a chance to build a little empathy, not to get overly didactic about it, but I think that can be, an aspect of reading this book.
Yeah. I think I would probably say that of all of your books, at least the ones that I have read thus far, like in all of them, there are themes of, you've mentioned family, found family, but there are also more challenging, or I guess I'd say harder themes like loss, or just challenges that kids are facing, but it's done in a way where that isn't the sole focus of the book. Like it's not a hard book, so to speak, in terms of these really tough things to read about. It's kids going through real things. And I think that's where some kids can see themselves in the pages of the book that they may not have been before, but definitely I think your books are empathy building machines and reading about other lives, other situations, other complexities that people are going through. And you just get I get so attached. I get so attached to these characters that I didn't want to let them go.
A sign of a really good book, and so I'll accept high praise, because it's a hard thing to maintain through a writing career, I think. But yeah, I'm interested in those kids who are going through a unique struggle of some kind, but I'm also really interested in the ones that have the chutzpah to survive those things. And they may not, they don't find it right away, but that's sort of part of their journey through the book is, how am I gonna survive this? And a lot of the times it seems, though, if I were to talk about the books as if I hadn't written them, I feel like my characters, they survive by being themselves. We can all sort of choose what part of ourselves we're going to put forth. And I think Addie Schmieder from Waiting for Normal at one point says, I made the decision to ungrump. And I thought, yeah, we can do that sometimes. We can't sustain it all the time. We can go away and be grumpy, but you can have a moment where you can kind of choose how you're going to react to something. And there you go, I don't know if you've read The Truth is Told by Mason Buttle. Have you seen that book?
No, I have not read that one yet.
Hey, this one, it's funny. It came 10 years after Waiting for Normal, and I was so proud. It won the Schneider Family Book Award, which is all about, disability and therefore about empathy. And Mason too is this kid who's in a down on their luck family. I mean, they've had a lot of hits recently, and that I think is really interesting too. It's when your family, when the stuff that's been happening to your family that you are kind of an innocent on. I mean, it just circumstance with a
Yeah.
big C, you know, um, and the way that they endure them. And I think that when you're a child, you you're not going to be the one that solves those problems, especially not when you're a child in a middle grade novel. you know? And that I think is one of the other pieces is that I think often for me anyway, I write where you know, the I mean, in a middle grade novel, it's either like the parents are in charge or they should be in charge. And both things can be the problem for the main character. It depends, if they're in charge but doing things wrong, there's that's a problem, or kind of responsible for the circumstances or whatever. And other times it's just the whole family got unlucky for a while, and can they survive it? Can they kind of come out of it? So that's who I love to write about. Is that kid who's gonna, observe until they can act.
Yes. Well, that's the kind of kid I love to read about. And I would say not just for the sole reason of recommending to another child, but as adults, we all have inner children that still need some love and still need some care and still need some inspiration. And I think that's what children's literature can do for adults, but that's especially what I find in your books. There are hard things that the kids are going through, but there are things that they do control. There are things they hang on to. They are filled with such spirit and strength and resiliency, even in the face of all they're going through. As I mentioned, I think at least at the moment, my favorite is A Home for Goddesses and Dogs. It's the one that you especially recommended to me at the festival, especially because I have 4 dogs of my own. So I am a dog lover, and you knew that I would love this. Um, but I loved it because, you know, the characters, the found family, all of the things just combined to where there was a hard situation, but she did find these silver linings. She's found these actions she could take. And one of the things I loved about that book as well, and I'm thinking maybe it's inspired by your uh, illustrator background, is the goddesses themselves. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that book, maybe a little bit about the storyline, and then I want to know where those goddesses came from, that idea, because I need to make some of my own.
Yes. Yeah. So the story. So this is a story of Lydia, and Lydia is loses her mom in the very beginning of the book, and that's kind of not actually the story. That's where we meet her. Actually, she has lost her mother, and it was an expected death, and so it's going to sound funny to say, but I drew from, a real life thing I knew about where there was a mom, who she was sick for so long. She was terminal for so long that for this young child and for the mom who passed, there was kind of a relief in it being done. And, what you knew was coming had come. So in Lydia's case, though, she's going off to live with an aunt and the aunt's wife, who she doesn't know either of them all that well, and she calls them my new adults. She refers to them
Yeah.
as her new adults. And she goes from Rochester, New York, to a tiny town in Connecticut to live with them, and everything there is new, and she wants to be this cooperative kid and wants it to work, but she's really kind of reticent to to talk much about things, and to do her grieving kind of out loud to these new people who are new to her. the same week that Lydia arrives at this farmhouse where they live, and there's also an old landlord that lives there, and he's in his 90s, and he always talks about, well, I'm not dead yet, I can't wait till I'm dead, that kind of thing. He feels kind of finished with life, not in a totally maudlin way. He actually jokes about it.
Old Ellery.
Yeah, Elroy. Yeah, Elroy. She comes to live with them, and just days later, they go. The aunt and and Eileen go to pick out a dog with her from an adoption event, and Lydia herself thinks, aren't we, why would you do this now? Haven't we gotten enough, enough things that are new going on right now? Whoops, something just slipped and fell. Sorry. I hope that didn't make a horrible crack in the audio. Probably did. Apologies. That's me. So yeah, and they bring home the dog, and of course the dog is kind of troublesome. And Lydia's not a dog person. She's never owned a pet. She had a mother who was on oxygen for a heart condition. All this time, there weren't things like pets at her house. They'd been abandoned. She'd been abandoned by her father. There's a bit of a thread, about that. Where did he go, Mr. Absentee? And all of that. So she's got a lot to get used to, but she brings with her this box of paper goddesses. And the goddesses are actually old photographed images that have then been collaged onto in a heavy way by Lydia and her mother. And they kind of record their days together, many of their days together. And it's not a couple that's not a mother and daughter who could go out and, they were not going to make it to the Taylor Swift concert and things like that. I mean, the mom didn't, had trouble leaving home. It was kind of Lydia's job to run down to the bodega, and pick up, supplies and things like that. And I think they had helpers from the outside too. We don't spend too much time learning about that in the book, but she had learned a certain kind of self-reliance, and it's just, even when you are confident at things, if you come to a new place, it's sort of, how do you let people know that, So she decides to try to be competent with this dog. And what I did with that was, I'm a huge dog person too. We currently have 3. The yellow dog in this book is really modeled after one of our dogs, Brumus, who is gone now. But when we got him, he just clearly had so much baggage, and we kept trying to all we could really do was read his behavior. We really didn't know anything about him. We adopted him from, I think he was from Tennessee. And but sometimes the things an animal will do will let you know, oh, doesn't like X, doesn't like Y, doesn't like Z, or is afraid of, these kinds of things. So they're trying to read the dog through his behavior. And I thought, they're trying to create a backstory for him. And that's what I do every time I meet a new character that I'm going to write a book about. I have to know their backstory. They're not born on the page. When you open the book, they're bringing a history with them. And so I thought, what if they're kind of a foil for each other here? She's not really telling a lot about her past. And the dog, cannot tell its past except through its actions and things. So that was kind of that was what drew me to write the book, I think. And the goddesses, I just felt, with the mom's art, and it was kind of about women. And I will say it was kind of the book that I wrote when all the change was coming, the Women's March, and shortly after Me Too, and I think that women were making a certain kind of a stride during that time. And I almost put no males in the book. I almost didn't write any males into the book, but there are a few. But it's really about these women. So the goddesses represent things like, like if there was a day when they went to an art fair or something, they would do, they would make a goddess of the arts. And so they took these old photographs, which were actually kind of those formal, sort of bogged down looking images of women. They're looking pretty repressed in these photos, unsmiling for whatever reason, from like an old studio in Cleveland, Ohio. And this is where they got this folio at a flea market. And so, they change them up, they pink up their faces. They give them lips and hats and, fish for hands and things like that. And so we definitely, definitely had a goddess party here at the house, and we collaged up before the book came out so that I could have these images to take with me to the events I was doing, and say, anyone can make their own goddess, and which has made this very popular with book groups. Particularly, I mean, often the mother-daughter book groups, but it doesn't have to be mother-daughter. Family book groups or whatever, and everybody, everybody would do their goddesses, and so I've gotten many pictures of them over the years. It was really neat. Yeah, and Lydia hid these, not to do a spoiler. She hid them from her new adults, from Aunt Brat and from Eileen all along. And in fact, she even kind of created a little space in the old house that they live in, and that let's just say that fell through. And you and I will laugh, and anyone who wants to read the book can find out exactly what that means.
Yes.
But then she found a different purpose for them toward the end, and just how to organize them into a memoir of her time with her mom, because when you lose your mom at 13, that's going to be so limited. And it was very cathartic, I think, for her.
Yeah.
So that's the goddesses. Yeah.
That was a huge part of the book for me. I kept trying to imagine what they would look like. I was Googling, different art things so that I could imagine what that layered kind of look would be like. And the thought of creating my own, I'm one of those people who says, I'm not very artistic. And I know we're all creative and we're all artistic, but I have a hard time believing that in myself. But I thought reading that, oh, I could make that, because that's just a representation of what I'm thinking and feeling and doing, that I could do. And it sounds so much fun.
Oh yes, all you need to do is start with, a human image, and start to kind of grow it from there. And I mean, the stakes are low here. We just,
Right.
we're just going to glue some stuff on, and if we don't like it, we'll pick it off, and then we'll paint over it, and then we'll, smudge the face back out again or whatever. And if you want to see some goddesses, I am certain that there are goddesses on my Instagram account, but you got to flick back quite a ways.
Okay.
But that's kind of fun to look at, some of the goddesses, and some of them were very powerful. It's kind of neat. It's a fun thing to do.
Just such a nice idea to have this collection of goddesses that just have your back, basically,
Yeah.
and give you shoulders to stand on and things to remember and memories to hold on to. I loved that whole idea. It was beautiful.
That's so sweet. I was telling you that this book had been challenged and then banned in some Texas towns, and
Yeah.
Maybe elsewhere too that I just haven't heard about. And I was talking to a friend about it, and well, one of my friends said, "It's those damn lesbians," she said about it, and a woman from a gay couple, and I laughed about that. But another friend pointed out, she goes, "I don't know if it's just the gay people." She said, "You got goddesses in here. That is a pagan thing, and that may be another reason it's the religious right that's after you." And so, it hadn't even occurred to me, but yes, sir, there it is. That could be, when I just thought of it as kind of art and kind of something representational. They're almost like little meditations, the goddesses,
Yes.
and that's
Yeah.
how anybody who wants to make one should approach one. I mean, I'm this art person at heart, and I would walk into a school and with this book, and I would love to run a goddess workshop. I think that'd be so fun.
Yeah.
So
Could you run that online for adults? Because I know a lot of us who would
Right.
attend.
Oh yeah, gosh, that would be so fun, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be great? And that's how it was. I invited a bunch of friends over. I made a big soup and had a
Yes.
bunch of friends over one night, put art materials all over the tables, and then provided these old pictures. In some cases, I ran them through watercolor paper so that they could mess with them right on the page and that kind of thing. I mean, those of you who are creative and want to do that kind of thing, or want to feel creative, or even if you think you'll ruin it, who cares?
Right.
You won't ruin
Right.
it. It's just
Yeah.
doing it.
Art
It's
is
just,
therapy. And that was really
oh,
clear in this book. Art is a form of creative therapy. Yeah.
yes, it's also a form of community, whether it's just community with one, that like Lydia with her mother, or whether it was, my whole group of buddies who came over and agreed to do this thing with me, and we were having a blast.
Oh,
It was so fun.
so fun. And I am definitely going to go haunt your Instagram way back further so that I can have a peek at those. And
Great.
I'm gonna put a bug in your ear about the goddess workshop for adults.
Yeah. Buzzing.
So why don't we shift to talk about your newest book? I already said A Home for Goddess and Dogs was my favorite, but anybody here seen Frenchie is certainly a contender for that title. And I pressed this book into many teachers' hands as well. In fact, the teacher that I was at the conference with, I was like, this is, you have to, if you haven't read this one, you have to get this. So why don't you give us the rundown of an anybody here seen Frenchie?
So anybody here seen Frenchie is the story of kind of an unusual friendship, perhaps. Aurora Pauline Petriquin is probably the loudest child most of us would ever know. And her best friend is Frenchie Livernois, and he doesn't talk. Um, so he also is kind of seems kind of introverted and is maybe a reflector, kind of person, whereas Aurora is very loud and bouncy and impulsive, very impulsive, and will bounce at anything and dive in. But making friends has easily for her, uh, in part because she's much, and so when she meets Frenchie, it just brings out something different in her, and it's really Aurora's is the main character, and she's also your narrator most of the time. But he kind of chooses her as his person. He sort of goes over and stands near her, and she feels good about that, probably flattered about that, and so it sort of gives her a different kind of purpose in her school, and where she's, we are a good team here. They're also neighbors, and they really are. They enormously enjoy the natural world in into which I have a huge connection. And I threw in something. I mean, well, I didn't throw in. One of the inspirations was my own encounter here in Connecticut with a piebald deer, which is a white-tailed deer in my case that presents with a spotted coat, and the one I would see roaming here, like I mean, right against my property, was unusually symmetrical and therefore, sort of to a human eye, very beautiful, kind of looked like a plush toy almost. And a piebald deer will also have other irregularities on its outside. It has like a bulbously adorable nose, and is usually smaller than the rest of the herd, short-legged, just kind of overall small. In fact, I first met it when it was quite young, and it crossed the road in front of me, and I thought it was somebody's goat. And I stopped and I looked at it and I took a photograph of it. And then, as time went by, for about 21 months, we would see it. So of course I looked it up and learned about it. And that was actually kind of a heartbreaker, because when something, has these odd, irregularities on the outside, it usually indicates that something's also wrong on the inside. And piebaldism is actually a mutation. And often the organs are either out of place or turned or too small, or won't get them through the rest of their life. Any one of a number of things. I mean, some piebalds never make it, off the ground. I mean, some simply die at birth, and have really severe bone irregularities. This one did reasonably well, but I did see it for 21 months, and that was it. I saw it running with others at one point, but it wasn't as shy as a lot of deer. And so, there's that magical thing that comes back to me that always has been my childhood. If a bird will land near you, if a turtle chooses your stream, it's a sort of it's kind of self-centered kind of thought, but you do. If something stays and chooses you, that's very special. You feel that it chooses you. It's probably just going about its own business, or just a lovely place to raise a skunk family or whatever. So it's kind of enchanting. So that's how I kind of felt about this deer. And, I would look for it a lot. I asked my neighbors, keep watch for that deer, keep watch for that deer. And I knew it would find its way into a book in some way. And so indeed I have Aurora and Frenchie, encounter this deer, and it means everything to Aurora. And she tells them, we're going to follow it. We're going to follow this deer. We're going to follow any chance we get. We're going to follow it, which is not always safe, of course. So anyway, one goes missing. The school drop finally succeed at forming a colony. She's been her bestie for about 3 years. And when he goes missing, she just feels terribly responsible. She forgot to look over her shoulder and make sure that he was behind her. And so we don't know where he's gone. So the book has a couple of different points of view. Frenchie has his own chapters while he's missing. Aurora has these anxiety-riddled chapters where she's very worried, but active, proactive. The families are very close together, and the community just comes together to help find him. And that is basically, that's basically the story. There's danger and whatnot, but I think the comforting piece of this book is that you do know where, your reader does know where Frenchie is, not all the time, but there are check-ins kind of where a chapter will be from his point of view. And you can see how he's thinking about things. But he also, for an autistic kid, and that is, I don't think I name him autistic in the book. I think it's in the flap, but not in the book. And I just wanted him to be Frenchie, who he was. I'm like that when I'm seeing my characters, like when I was seeing Mason Buttle, I'm kind of watching them act things out, and then if there's maybe a diagnosis or, a label we're going to put on them, which I always sort of hate to do it, I kind of look that up later, but I first let it roll out. I think that for writing purposes, that works better for me. And, then I'll kind of check things or be inspired by what I find out. But autism is this giant spectrum, and there are so many levels. I'm sure someday we're going to stop calling it all just one thing, and we will get get closer to what is happening for each person, and accept that. I think we've talked about acknowledgement versus acceptance, and I think first we have to acknowledge that autism exists, and then we have to so that's kind of the education piece. And then we're going to accept that person as they are, perhaps give them strategies as we would give any learner strategies that might, help their world be fuller, bigger, help their lives be richer, whatever, but not exactly change them totally. I don't see a reason for that. So that's my whole, that was my feeling when writing about him. I kind of, one of the things I love about that book was that I was using a certain map of a certain area in Maine, and I was telling my editor about it, and she goes, well, show me. So I sort of scratched up map, where I scribble, there's measuring things and all this mess. And since it is also about a search party, there were a couple of different ways searches work that I was using in this map. And then the artist created a map on the kind of the end pages for this, which I love having there. And I've been hearing from some classrooms who have said we love having the map for reference, and that we just kind of do look at it every once in a while, and we see how underdeveloped the paths were and stuff. Some are like broken line and that kind of thing, and how as the crow flies, things are closer than you think they are. And so that's how, but by road, it would take you a long time to get there. Yes. So that it gets confusing when you're searching, someone did not walk the road, they walked through the woods or something like that. So that was great fun for me. I really enjoyed writing that book.
How do you, so you've mentioned kind of seeing your characters and getting their backstory. How do you bring a character to be? How do the ideas, does it come to you? Do you take nuggets from your own life and it just kind of turns into one? I'm so curious, especially as I think about what might you be writing next? Where do those ideas come from?
So the characters, they're always kind of composites. I mean, and they're all of them do have some part of me in them, or what I might be interested in, or what I can get interested in. That's the thing I say about, what should you write? What you know, write what you want to know, or what do you write about? And I always say, write the thing you can't ignore. Find, let it hitch itself to you and find out more about it. And that's sort of what happens with the kids too. I feel like, I'm in the schools a lot for visits, and I always notice who's kind of in the background having, an unknown struggle, and I'm merely guessing at what might be going on with them. And, I don't have to know, I don't know, I often reach out to them and just at least say hello. I mean, sometimes there's a crier, and and who knows what that's about, and I don't need to know that. That's almost like an invasion. But just to acknowledge them, I think sometimes can change the kind of day they're going to have that day, or that kind of thing. So I'm interested in those kids. I mean, I was kind of a nervous worrier kid, I think, and I know it affected my classroom presence, my demeanor in the classroom, and probably really annoyingly known as a crier in the classroom, was falling apart all the time or something like that. And I don't know what it was, it's just emotional, and so I think in that way, I'm interested in kids who are like that, but it also could be from something else, a trouble at home, something that happened on the on the playground or whatever. Those kind of things do interest me. So the way to bring them forward, I think, is I mean so much of it happens by ear. I usually kind of land on a situation, and that might be altered as I write. It might change, or just be sort of it grows larger or richer as I write. But then dropping this kid in, and you just kind of ask, what are their feelings? How are they going to react to this? What level of self-advocacy are they going to have? Because that, again, that's that adults in charge or not in charge thing. There's going to be a limitation on them for that. And so that, I think, is one of the hardest things about middle grade, is to get that balance right. They can't drive cars. They can't unenroll themselves at school. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things. So I'm always interested in that, and what is within their grasp, what is within their reach for making a change. Who might they align themselves with, and that I think is when there's this character at the center of things, and then you drop another character on the page. And I often like to list things underneath the characters. This is kind of a character map thing, with the main character at the center, with everything I think I know about them listed at the bottom, then a character maybe off to the left or the right, and a list of things I know about them. And then there's this line that connects them, and on that line I write something about what's going to go on between them. And then finally, for me, that's plot. So that is a kind of a way to get things rolling. And I usually, usually when it goes well, I start to get impatient with the map and move into a notebook and start hearing lines of dialogue and things like that. And then eventually the notebook doesn't have enough room in it or speed with it, and so I go in and begin to type. So I think that's one of the that's a little bit about process, and
Yeah,
not the same for everybody. And I do this awful thing to myself where if I don't know, I don't write chronologically. And so if I know a scene that I know will happen at some point, I go ahead and I write it, because I happen to be the kind of writer who will just spin in place if I try to do chronological. It's not so great when you have all these random things that then you have to organize. So it's not that I recommend that, but I do recommend it over not writing, over getting nothing done.
right. That's a very good point.
So,
That's a very good point. I love knowing that backstory of the writing process. I mean, I adore books. I so respect the people that write them, and to get a glimpse onto how that process comes to be. And in my brain, I feel like my brain could work a lot like yours. I am a lister, I am a sketch noter, and to see the progression from the ideas to the list to then the connections and then to the notebook and then to the dialogue, and just such a progression that I can imagine now. And I almost want to think about your books and then go backwards to what some of those character lists and things might look like. But that's such a wonderful way to bring that, to bring any story to life, and in a way that just has these natural steps, which I think now that I know that, it kind of explains, at least to me, your stories are so relatable, whether
Oh,
it's the characters, it's the things they're going through, it's the side characters, or even the descriptions of the locations. Like, everything is so relatable. I can picture it, and to know
oh,
how you got there just feels like a neat little secret. That's not a secret because this is a podcast, but I feel honored to be able to know about it.
oh, thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah, I mean, any writers, I think that that's a valuable thing to pass on. I mean, I try to talk about that, and when I do go to schools, I keep referring to school visits only because I just I mean, I love that chance to connect with the kids, and I love the opportunity to talk to kids who have read the books and let them know the inside story or the work that was behind it, and of course, the goal is to have it be seamless, and I tell them where I struggled and whatnot, and and sometimes someone will say, I could tell you struggled there. And I say, you can. Well, I have to do better next time. I just love that. But I think, I meet a lot of writers, young and old, who kind of say, well, I have an idea and I can't get it off the ground. And, and of course, I know a lot of writers who outline the entire thing and they go from there. They got to have that outline. And I can't really have an outline. It's a very kind of a wild vine process, and like I say, it's not a recommendation, it's just the way it is for me.
Well, it works, so why not?
Yeah, thanks, that's great.
Are you working on something else for the future?
Yes, I am. I'm working hard on something right now. So this is sort of a long story, but I'm kind of behind in terms of, I mean, I was releasing a book every 2 years for a while, and then I had a huge family situation with both elderly parents being sick and then diagnosed and then passing within a 2 year period of time, which is I'm really kind of still crawling out of. My dad died in June. And so I found my level of focus was dreadful. And I just really needed to take care of them and do that work. So I've struggled to get a manuscript out this time, but I did, and this is interesting because I have, for the first time in years, I have a new editor, because my editor, Catherine Teagan, retired from Harper. And since I didn't finish the book in time, I moved on and working with Erica Sussman, and she has recently read the manuscript I gave her. And this is a first for me, and it's very interesting, and it's going to be complicated. It's going to be really hard, but it should be really fun too. She feels that the book should be from a different character's point of view. One
Oh,
of the other characters in the book. So, and then we talked about that a lot, and then we sort of got around to, or maybe it should be multiple points of view. And when I read Anybody Here Seen Frenchie, there are a couple of the community members who have chapters, and they're in third person. And I gotta say, I loved writing those, and they just rolled right out. I mean, they much faster than the first person chapters, because of course they weren't holding the frame as hard, as much. So I think that might be one of the reasons why. So anyway, I've gotten this book back, and what I'm doing now is exploring that. I'm exploring more points of view. I think of this one as a sister story. There are three girls in this family. They've been displaced by the housing crisis. And which was related to the pandemic, because mom lost her work during the pandemic, and dad hung on, but and the family has to separate. That has to stay where he's working, and they hit the road in their schoolie, which is a school bus that's been converted into a camper, which they'd always enjoyed recreationally prior to this year that this happens. But now they're actually kind of on the road because they don't have a home. Dad is renting a small room, and so and so they're they're trying to make an adventure out of it, but the school year is beginning and they're out longer than they think they're going to be, and it goes long, and you've got four women in a tin can size. It's feels smaller with each passing day, I'm sure, but it's there are the adventures, there are the people they meet, and there's that brush against that question, we are unhomed, or are we homeless, the way that person we heard said it. I mean, even the government still uses the term homeless, so we'll see by the time this book goes to press, we'll find out what is what's being used and what's considered palatable. But right now, even the government says homeless, and some people sneer that word at them. Other people say, oh wow, you're camping still, but it's getting late in the year too, and they're up in Maine. And so it's just a lot of tension and whatnot. And definitely that it was written in the middle sister's point of view, and I think we're going to kind of hear from everybody now instead, which will be kind of neat. It's definitely an assignment. I mean, if this is, I will be tackling this bird by bird.
Bird by bird. Yes, I love that.
In the Hots book.
Yes, yes.
Well, but I feel like I'm going to have a really great revision story to tell. It fits with what was happening in my life. I maybe I missed that moment of focus I might have had or whatever. But I mean, the great news is the story flies. So now it's just going to be a rearrangement. So I'm in the process of doing that now. And it involves my ear a lot, because I have to let those other characters drop in and have a voice instead of, just one narrator reacting to them. So, but yeah, there's a couple of different opportunities with it, I think, that are neat. I'll tell this audience that, at 62, or no, so I'm sorry, I keep saying 62, and sadly, it's actually 64. I'm 64 years old. I don't know why I keep subtracting 2 years. I used to be more inclined to add 2 years. I do worry a little bit about being dusty as an author. I want to stay, my kids always laugh because I say, how do I stay hip? And my kids go, well, Mom, if you have to ask. Then they say, okay, I know. Or so I ask them, what's a hip word for this? And they're like, oh boy, here she goes again. But I was thinking that, if the oldest sister in this book kind of talks through some kind of a video, maybe she's doing a recording of herself, because there are these devices now, which of course I never experienced as a kid. And then again, that the other thing is that adds some more conflict too, because it's usually the oldest kid in the family gets the phone, but I don't know what age other kids are getting phones at. Of course, it varies all over, I'm sure. But, I think a lot of 12-year-olds do not have phones, and so, she just kind of has a different opportunity to record. So one may be journaling, and one may be, doing this sort of cool sounding, I don't know, like, here I am unfiltered, kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love books that do have that different point of view. It definitely adds a richness to the story, but I love what you just said about the different modalities. Like, one maybe is speaking into a phone, and one is a journaler, and then you're getting the whole picture, but that way, different experiences. Oh gosh, is there an expected date that I can look forward to this?
It won't be before 2025 that it publishes. Okay. And that depends on how well I do. Right. Goodness, this is like the confessional podcast. Yeah, because I mean, this is a big task. So I'm, but I'm working on it. And like I said, I'm going to try to, think of it as play. The story's the ball of clay. And now, how will we mold that? How will we take that apart and play with it? One of the best things an early editor ever said to me when she was, giving me some revision notes, and I was really afraid to even say, ugh, what if that doesn't feel quite right? And she said to me, oh yeah, what I say might not be in the clay. And that is always, I mean, I've had really respectful editors. This was a very respectful, response to this book. I mean, she didn't even write about it. We just talked about it, which was appropriate for where this was. And she said, and then, that would be the point at, when you kind of start to, get these other voices, if that works for you, that's when we'll start, talking about, what else to do with the story. But she's very attached to the family, doesn't mind the voice it's in, but thinks that maybe, the older sister has more of a story to tell. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And probably only the podcast listeners will know that was going on.
yes. And well, you've got a beautiful writing space to do that kind of playing in. So
Yeah, I know. Winter's coming. We'll hunker down and, just kind of do that. So yeah, it'll be nice. But yeah, thank you for asking about future work. It feels far off in the future. I will be really, I do have kind of like a book gap, but I don't know. I was talking to my writing group this morning about that, and we were saying that, middle grades a little bit is having a little bit of a quiet spell. And we think it's because, the kids really did suffer through the pandemic years in terms of their learning. And they are, in some cases, behind a little bit, in some cases, a lot, and in some cases, not at all. But I do think that, the teachers have had to do the work of, knowing these texts, accepting these texts. We're having a lot of book banning. And so there are, some fears. I think there's probably, I'm just imagining that there's a return to the familiar, to what we have done before, because they have so much other work. They're digging so much harder now. I really think that the job must be very tough right now. So take a familiar text and let's do that one. And so new books right now, I think, are having a little bit of a slow motion off the shelf. I mean, that was the case even with Frenchie. It kind of had this delayed rollout, it was interesting. So I don't know, true or not true. I'm kind of speculating, but I have kind of heard it's a little quiet. So if it's a little longer till this one comes out, it may not be the worst thing for it. And, I do think it's a book that'll resonate with my past readership, and, it'll still be what they expect from me. So that's good.
well, I will eagerly wait for this one because
Well, I'll be happy to send you an ARC when it comes out.
oh,
So
I would love it. And then, the next time I see you at a conference, you'll know the girl running to your table.
I will love it. I will have my arms open for you, Stephanie.
Well, where can listeners find out more about you? Take a quick peek at your books. Do you have any place online or social media that you'd like to share?
Well, I am not on X or Twitter much anymore. I mean, I'm there, but I never go there. I never really did. That one was always hard for me. But I have, Instagram, which I kind of consider the peek behind the curtain. Kind of, it shows you little bits of my life, and you'll see my dogs, and you'll see the ferns and the nuts that drop in that area in my woods and whatnot, and just what I'm up to. I've actually been kind of quiet on Instagram lately, but I've got to get going again. And I will. I enjoy images, so that's a place that you can learn more. I'm also at leslieconnor.com. My website is there and reasonably up to date. And those are the two main places. And of course, HarperCollins has my books listed and featured sometimes. And there are a few nice study guides that they provide too. If you're ever, excuse me, presenting a book and want, a little bit of guidance or a little help or some ideas about what to do, that's a place, that you can go.
Well, I will be sure to put links to those into the show notes to make it easy for everyone to just click and find you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. I've so enjoyed the conversation. I will send you pictures of my goddesses that I create to keep me accountable for that. And I'm just so grateful you're helping me kick off the podcast. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
It's a thrill, and congratulations to you. I mean, I know you have other great work in the podcast realm, and I know that you are constantly working on classwork too. So I think it's wonderful, and those of us who write Kid Lit really appreciate people like you too. You're our heroes too.
Oh, thank you. What a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Kid Lit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit love. Thanks for listening.